Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jessica, and I live in Almuñécar on the Costa del Sol, or Costa Tropical. And a couple of weeks ago, I had a chat with Ali, and we were talking about overcoming adversity. And I don't know if any of you were on that call or if you subsequently listened to it, but we were looking at different things of how you can be aware of what your mind is up to, because your mind can be a bit like a naughty child sometimes, and kind of making it rather hard for you to focus on the good stuff rather than the bad stuff. So do, if you want to, go back and have a listen to that. I'm not going to cover all the points that I did on that, but one of the few things that we talked about was that thoughts are just thoughts, and we don't actually have to believe them. And when we're in stress, like this lockdown and a whole scenario is happening for us right now, our minds and thoughts can really kind of run amok. And if we understand that actually we can stop and question those thoughts, then that can really, really help. So today I wanted to just take that a little one step further and look at some tips and ideas and maybe things that we can discuss together about uncertainty. I was talking to somebody else recently and I said, what do you find the hardest thing about this? And she said, the uncertainty of it. And I thought about that, and I thought about why that's so challenging for us. I was thinking, we are not mentally set up for uncertainty. We like to know what's going to happen. We like to be planned. We like to have our kind of, today we're going to do this, and tomorrow we're going to do this, and this is going to happen at this point. And I mean, I know, which I think is wonderfully ironic, that I've actually finally managed to plan out the first 6 months of this year last November, which was the first time I'd actually got around to doing that, even though I say I'm going to do it every year. And then, irony of all ironies, all those plans went out the window. So airline tickets were booked, and I kind of made contact with people, and I was going to do this in March, and I was going to have these people come out here in May, and all those kind of things. And we all have that in our life. We all know kind of vaguely where life is going. So we're not mentally set up for something to come along and go, nope, you have no idea. You have no idea how long this is going to go on for. You have no idea how long what's going to happen. You have no idea what's going to happen when we come out of it. So even though the uncertainty is beginning to ease, because in some countries, they're coming out of it. They're in their first phase of coming out of it. Here in Granada and Malaga, we're still a bit locked down, but in other areas of Spain, they're starting to move out. But even though we have a little bit, we still don't have real certainty of what's going to happen next. And the ego hates this. The ego is that part of us that likes to control as much as possible, if not everything. And the ego has a real hissy fit when we can't make any plans. It doesn't like it, and it will kind of throw up a whole load of anxiety because of it. If we were able to tap in and slow down enough through kind of meditation or breathing or whatever, and get in touch with that deeper, wiser part inside of us, that part's absolutely fine, because that part lives in today, in this moment in time. And this moment in time, we're all sitting in our homes, we're fine, we've got food on the table, life is not completely threatened at this moment in time. But the ego is projecting out into the future and projecting the horror stories. And so that's why we have so much trouble with uncertainty, because right now we can't know what's coming next, and we want to know what's coming next. We want to plan, and we want to control it. And I think I was talking to a friend of mine, I think if we're being asked anything on a personal level right now, it's about how present can we be to this moment in time, rather than trying to hold on to what's happening. So it's almost like having that thing of hands wide open. Okay, nothing holding on to nothing. Can we be present? Can we be accepting? So I think that for me, I don't know if any of you want to comment at this time, please feel free to do so if you would like to. But for me, it's very much about, it's because we don't have that normalcy of thinking we're in control. Whether we are in control or not is a totally different conversation, but thinking we're in control. One of the things I think that happens when we're faced with uncertainty is that we go into our survival brain. And we have kind of 3 brain waves, or brain states rather than waves. And we have our lizard reptilian brain, which we crawled out of the swamp with. And we have our multitasking brain. And then we have what you might call a higher brain, humanitarian brain, where we're into contribution and all those kind of things. And when we're faced with uncertainty, we flip into our survival brain. And the survival brain is where we go flight, fright, or freeze. There's a third one in the flight or fright. There's also freeze, where we just feel completely unable to do anything. And when we're not feeling comfortable with our world around us, which is what uncertainty does, we go into this survival space. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about that, because one of the things that I've been noticing with some people I've been talking with is that they're getting cross to themselves that they're in that space. And I just want to say it's actually totally normal to be flipped into that. And we're all going to be flipped into that. It doesn't matter how good we are at knowing what's going on. It doesn't matter how aware we are about, what happens within ourselves. We are going to flip into survival every now and again. It's absolutely a given. The most, evolved person is still going to have that happen with them, because it's what happens in the brain. We have a trigger, something comes along, pushes a button, or as Beatrice likes to say, pushes this great huge big button on my chest and just will flip us into it. And so the first thing is to be gentle with yourself when this happens. Don't berate yourself. Don't feel bad about the fact that, oh my God, I'm in this panic, or I'm in this anxiety, or I shouldn't be like this. No, it's fine, because it's normal, because you're human. And that's what humans do. They flip into survival every now and again. And interestingly, the more accepting you can be of being in that space and just being calm and gentle and nurturing with yourself in that space, the quicker you'll flip out of it. Because if you fight it, or if you make it wrong, what you're doing is adding an energy to it, and you're actually stoking it. Whereas if you can just go, there I am again. I'm feeling in a bit of a survival mode right now. I'm in a bit of freeze or fight or whatever it is. And just be gentle with yourself in that. You will come out of it much quicker. And so that's one of the things about that I wanted to mention. And the other thing is, other people are going to do that too. People of those around you, people that you come in contact with, whether it's personally one-on-one, if somebody you're living with, or whether it's people that you're WhatsApping with or Zooming with, or whatever kind of social things we're doing now. People at different times, and you might not be in survival mode at that time, but they're in survival mode. And it's also about allowing them their reality at this moment in time. You can't get somebody out of that space. They have to experience it themselves. What you can do is stay out of it and almost like be the beacon and say, look, there's another way, but I'm not going to force that. I'm not going to tell you to cheer up. I'm not going to tell you that everything's okay. I'm just going to be here as a solid support. So when you're ready to come out, I'm going to be here. And so it's really important to understand that other people around you at other times are going to flip into that every now and again. And you've got to let them, because it's their process of going through, and you've just got to be the one that stands out. It's like, you come across somebody with a great big hole, and they're down a great big hole. The last thing you want to do is jump down in the hole with them, because then two of you can't get out the hole. So you want to stay above in the hole and go, okay, there is a ladder if you want to use it. I can't make you use it, but there is a ladder if you want to use it. And meanwhile, I'll just stay up here and wait for you, and you can work your way through. So we're always better to actually stay steady in our space if we're not feeling in that space, and stay steady in there and let people come out. Because what we're saying energetically and mentally is that there's another way of being, and when you want to come and join this way of being, you can come and join this way of being. If you're really, really caught up in survival, and you realize it, if you have that lovely moment of awareness where you go, oh wow, look where I'm at, look what's going on here, you know, because sometimes we have those, we can actually almost like witness that we're in that survival space. The best thing you can do at that time is to do a reality check. And by that, I mean, literally just stop and look around you. Because whatever it is has flipped you into survival is probably not something that's right in front of you. It's probably a thought about the future or a thought about something that's going to happen. It might be something in front of you, in which case, obviously, you have to deal with that. But if it's a thought, you want to be able, and you've just got to that lovely space of witnessing that thought, which is always the first step. You want to just go, okay, what's really happening here? And do a reality check. What's really going on? Have I got a good enough reason to feel like this? Or am I just off in something that my head's going off in, and I'm going down a path I don't need to go down? So reality checks in that moment are really, really powerful, because most of the time you can sit back and look around and go, actually, it's all fine. Right now, this moment in time, it's all fine. And that gives you a solid ground, a solid foundation for you to then be able to step out from and step back into a normal space. So I think that's a kind of important, simple tool that you can use. So is there any questions at this point from what I've talked about, or any comments at all? Yeah, Sue, you have something?
Just to say that I think sometimes when one gets into an anxious state, it is hard to get in touch with reality, because the mind sort of takes over and you start to overthink and all this. So I think one thing that you pointed out earlier on was an important issue, was about giving yourself permission to be in that place, and that it's okay to acknowledge. I can't remember your actual words. Something like it's okay to acknowledge that this is a difficult place, and not to berate yourself. I think that is so important.
Yeah.
And so it you know, if you can do that, I think it relieves a lot of the pressure on you and the anxiety. But it also, just to point out, you know, it is difficult, I think, to do a reality check sometimes because you're in that other place.
And I think what you've just done, which is beautiful, thank you, is to point out that what you've just talked about is your first step. And then when it relieves some of the pressure is when you sometimes get the insight, it's like, oh, I'm caught up in this. And that's when you can do the reality check, when you're kind of ready to come out of it. It can be the step that brings you out of it. But yeah, you're right. Right at the beginning, you're not going to have enough awareness. That's why I was talking about that moment when you become aware of what you're caught up in. That's probably not going to happen right at the beginning, which is why the allowing yourself just to be there and be gentle with yourself is so crucial.
Yeah.
Because if you don't do that, then you're in a fight with it. And if you go into a fight with it, you're not going to win. You know. Yeah. So yeah, thank you for pointing that out. That's really helpful. Thanks. Anyone else before I move on to something else? No? Okay, cool. So I just want to, you know, uncertainty brings up a lot of fear for people, you know, and I want to just talk a little bit more about fear and why it is a good thing to shine a light on fear. Because fear, again, is a mind construct most of the time. We're not normally faced with a saber-toothed tiger at that moment, but it might feel like it. And I loved Neil Donald Walsh's book, Conversations with God, that I read many, many years ago, where he has this acronym for fear, which is false evidence appearing real. And I really liked that because it just made you realize that most of it, like we said earlier, is just something that the mind has made up. And so if we can know that those fears aren't necessarily true, the thing is that when we're dealing with situations like we're dealing with at the moment, a lot of people might argue, but it is true, it is going to happen. I don't know what's this, and we get very caught up in it. And the thing is that yes, there can be an element of truth in some fears, but there can also be a possibility that that fear won't come about. And I think that's a powerful understanding, is that just because we fear something doesn't mean it's necessarily absolutely 100% going to happen. But when we're caught in on that fear of uncertainty, it can feel 100% true that it's going to happen. And we can get very drawn into it. So even allowing for the possibility that fear is false evidence appearing real gives us the possibility of going, okay, I can acknowledge I feel like that right now, but I don't necessarily have to believe it. And why I like that is because when we acknowledge it, but don't necessarily have to go with it 100%, it gives us a different doorway when we're ready to be able to walk through. Because fear can be very inhibiting. Fear can hold you back. And once it gets a real hold of you, your mental acuity just kind of disappears almost. You can't think of a different way. You get so rabbit in headlights with something, you cannot think of another way out of it. You cannot think out of the box. And so just acknowledging that fear might feel what it feels for you, but there actually might be a different way of handling whatever this situation is, allows you to become much more creative in the moment. It might not happen straight away, but it at least allows a possibility for a different door to be opened, to understand that there might be a different way of dealing with whatever it is that you're fearful of in that time. So for me, I love that idea that I know I've got most of the answers within me somewhere. I've just got to get all the dross out the way so that I can allow them to rise. And fear is just part of that dross. And so it's like we become much more creative when we can allow ourselves a space to think again, or think differently, or think outside the box, or on another tangent in another direction. Because fear and worry are very much bedfellows. A fear comes up, and then worry will grab it and run with it. And worry is one of the biggest waste of energies and waste of times that we could possibly have in our lives. Interestingly, it's like, it doesn't get us anywhere. It's not creative. So if we're worrying about something, we're not going to be in the mindset of finding solutions. And so I always say worry is a waste of time. And if you're a real worrier, and I think I probably mentioned this on the earlier call to anybody who was in on that call, if you're really into worrying at the moment, what you need to be doing is setting yourself a worry half hour. And a worry half hour is a specific half hour in the day when you are allowed to worry. So, for example, you could set it between 4:30 and 5, and then any other time during the day that you catch yourself worrying, what you do is say, I can't do that right now because it's not my worry half hour. I've got to sit down at 4:30 and worry about that. And then literally at 4:30, you want to have a little alarm that goes off, and you want to sit down and go, okay, now I'm going to have a good old worry. And you'll begin to see that when you purposefully try to worry, what a waste of time and energy it is. And so it's a real easy way, an easy trick to break the habit of worry, because worry is not creative. And what we want to be in times of uncertainty is feeling our most creative. So the more creative things we do that aren't even necessarily related to kind of getting out of this situation or whatever the fears that you might be feeling at this time, but just doing anything creative. I know here locally we've been baking and things. I haven't baked for years, but it's a creative thing to do, and it feels like you're doing something new. So anything like that that taps you into your creativity will help you deal with whatever you're going on with the whole feeling of uncertainty. And so when you do have fears, you really want to kind of realize that they're not necessarily true. There is probably another side of it that we haven't allowed ourselves to see because we're stuck in the energy and we haven't got into the creative space of finding solutions. And when we've understood that, when we've come to that realization, you want to see, is there actually anything I can do right now about this situation that I'm worrying about? Is there anything I can do about it? And if there is, great. That gives you a step forward. And if there isn't, that's okay. Then it's about going, okay, right now, I cannot do anything about that one thing. There's a really interesting guy many years called Stephen Covey, and he wrote many books in the coaching world, and he came up with this idea of circles of influence. And circles of influence is if you had a little circle in the middle, and inside that circle of influence goes everything that you have influence over, everything where you can affect change, everything where you actually have some kind of influence over what happens. And then outside of that, he drew another circle and he went, this is the circles where you have no influence. And he said, we always want to be checking in with ourselves regularly and looking at which circle am I operating in right now? Am I operating in the circle where I have influence? Or am I trying to operate in the circle where I have no influence? Because if you're in the latter, if you're in the circle where you have no influence, the only thing you're going to get is frustrated. And you're also going to feel even more worried and fearful and uncertain because it's also out of your hands. So when we're feeling this feeling of uncertainty as we're going and living at the moment, we always want to be coming back into, what circle am I in? Am I in my circle of influence? And if I'm not, how can I get back into my circle of influence? And I think that's for me one of a really powerful thing when I catch myself wishing something out there was different, where I cannot change it right now. How do I bring that back into my circle? How do I bring it back into something that I can do? And it might not be related to what you're trying to create in the circle of non-influence. But if you can just bring yourself back into your circle of influence and do anything that's within your circle of influence, you will start to feel better because you'll start to feel, interestingly, where we started at the beginning, more in control. And so being in your circle of influence makes you feel like you've got more control over your world, which makes you feel less uncertain. So there's just a few pointers that I wanted to give you today. All right. So thank you, everybody, for joining in. And I hope you found it useful. And like I say, if anybody has any questions, you can contact me through the Costa Women group or through Facebook. I'm on there. Just private message me. And hope to see you all again soon.